This is Karen McDougall, a former Playboy Playmate of the Year, a woman now linked romantically to Donald Trump before his presidential days, but at the time when he was married and still is, of course, to Melania. That's her posing with Hugh Hefner. The New Yorker magazine reports that she and Trump had an affair punctuated by hotel hookups, payoffs, and illegal agreements to keep this all quiet. The White House calls the story fake news. We're joined now by presidential historian Allan Lichtman. He's a distinguished professor of history at American University and the author of The Case for Impeachment. Thanks for joining us, Professor Lichtman. Just before we get to the story of the middle of the week, we want to talk about the latest tweet from the president, which came out just a couple of minutes ago, saying this: "I never said Russia did not meddle in the election. I said it may be Russia or China or another country or group, or it may be a 400-pound genius sitting in bed and playing with his computer." The Russian hoax was what the Trump campaign, that it colluded with Russia and that it never did. So that's the latest in a series of tweets over the last 24 hours from the president. Professor Lichtman, what do you make of the latest comment from the president?
Well, it just shows how absurd the president's response has been. Can you imagine? You're in Canada. Imagine a revelation that Russia had engaged in a concerted campaign to manipulate Canadian elections and had broken a whole series of Canadian laws in doing so. And your prime minister showed no outrage whatsoever, but solely interpreted it in terms of what it meant for him. Can you imagine that? It's just impossible to think about any other world leader responding in this way that Donald Trump has. Of course, Donald Trump maybe has not outright denied that Russia meddled, and the word isn't meddled, the proper word is manipulated our elections, but he has done everything in his power to confuse, to deflect, to deny. He also said outright in September of 2017 that Russia didn't help me. I can tell you that. And of course, the whole thrust of the finding of Special Counsel Mueller was not only that Russia intervened and manipulated the election, but they did so on behalf of Donald Trump. And as far as collusion is concerned, this indictment doesn't reach that. But this is not the last word for Mueller. This doesn't even get into the Russian hacking of Democratic emails, meetings between high-level Trump officials and Russian operatives. So to say that this shows there was no collusion would be like saying, oh, the special counsel indicted Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates. Of course, that clears Michael Flynn. You know, that's utter nonsense. More indictments are likely to come.
And we'll stay tuned for that. The story that almost got lost in all of this last week, of course, was the alleged extramarital affair, a possible payment to hush it up, really only a few days after the allegations that he had, in fact, also paid off a porn star, Stormy Daniels, as well. Why haven't those stories of presidential infidelity, allegedly, received that much attention?
Well, we suffer from scandal fatigue with Donald Trump. There are so many scandals swirling around this White House, not only the whole Russia connection, but also the keeping on of Rob Porter, a man credibly accused of domestic violence in the White House. You tend to lose sight of scandals because there are so many. You also have to put a lot of blame on the Republican Party and Donald Trump's evangelical base. The Republican Party, particularly its strong evangelical supporters, have always pictured and advanced themselves as the party of personal responsibility and morality. And they have totally abdicated that in the case of Donald Trump, you know, giving him so-called mulligan after mulligan and holding him in no way accountable for his personal behavior or his immorality. How can these people then claim to tell the rest of us what to believe and how to behave? And this scandal is serious because it shows once again Donald Trump's absolutely disdainful treatment of women, his use of women as objects, and there may have been laws broken in the payoffs, the alleged payoffs to at least to Stormy Daniels. which occurred right before the election and may well have come from Donald Trump himself. We know, at the very least, his personal lawyer, who cleans up things for Donald Trump, admitted he was directly involved.
We've just got time for one more quick question, Professor Lichtman, and I'm going to ask you this. We've seen throughout history presidents involved in infidelities, and yet they weren't front page news. What has changed?
Well, for the most part, presidential infidelities were not reported in the news. They were covered up. You know, we didn't learn really about the infidelities of Franklin Roosevelt or Warren Harding or John F. Kennedy or Lyndon Johnson until afterwards. The one scandal, of course, that wasn't covered up and that did burst during a presidential term was that of Bill Clinton, and he paid a very, very severe price for his affair with Monica Lewinsky. So far, Donald Trump doesn't appear to have paid any price or taken any responsibility for his treatment of women.